All right, next item, Grubb property termination of contract of sale. Okay. Dr. Donald.
Chairman Dupree, members of the school board, and Dr. Hattrick, in your board packet, we do have an action item in which we are recommending that the board terminate the contract with Mr. Robert Grubb. Again, as staff, we do so reluctantly, but we are also aware that there has been, a negative approval from the planning staff who have recommended denial. We had a lot of very, I would consider, strong criticism from members of the community, particularly those located immediately adjacent to the site. And the planning staff has recommended in order to make something like this work, it would require a comprehensive plan amendment, and that is something that would require at least 12 to 15 months. As you know, we have had this property under contract well over 18 months. Mr. Grubb, in our opinion, has bent over backwards. He has received a lot of what we believe is unwarranted criticism. But again, we believe that in the best interests for the school board and the students of Loudoun County, we are recommending that you terminate this contract. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Donald. Mrs. Godfrey.
I move that the Loudoun County School Board terminate the Grubb property contract of sale and further that the chairman of the board is authorized to sign the contract of sale termination upon approval by legal counsel.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Godfrey, seconded by Mr. Nizako. Mrs. Godfrey.
I, too, regret very much that this movement is necessary, but I was present at the Planning Commission public hearing, and I am aware that the Planning Commission staff is not positive on the use of this land for this purpose. So I think we have to draw back and find another way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Other comments? Mr. Nizako.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For all the reasons already stated, I second this motion, again with regret. Also want to extend our thanks to Mr. Grubb and his family for the gracious way in which he has worked with us over these many, many months. Only other additional comment I would have is that I think this highlights for us an issue which is going to be an issue for the next school board and the next board of supervisors, which is to say a revisiting of the comprehensive plan and a discussion and perhaps revision of what it means to site schools in or adjacent to towns. The current plan does have flexibility in it, and unfortunately in this case the interpretation of that plan by the staff and the Planning Commission apparently did not recognize enough flexibility for their satisfaction to allow this to go forward, in addition to other objections that people had. But I do believe that this is going to be perhaps one of the most important issues that these next two boards take up in the next term, and I would encourage them to take it up early in the term because it's very significant for the future of the school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nizako. Other comments? Ms. Smith.
Just asking, has someone visited Mr. Grubb and given him our sentiments on this thing?
Yes. Okay. Ms. Sarah Howard O'Brien spent about an hour and a half with him, and
okay.
I just comment because it's been alluded to here. The Grubbs have been so gracious in the way in which they have dealt with the board, with the public, with their neighbors. And I think it was just, you know, you couldn't make the story up. It was just typical. After Ms. Howard O'Brien had gone out to talk to them, to deliver the bad news, Ms. Grubb knew that Dr. Adamo liked some green beans that she cans, and she sent him some. So they're just wonderful people.
Thank you, Dr. Hattrick. Other comments? Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, I am going to vote no on this motion in recognition of the fact that the parcels like this, of any size, large enough to accommodate schools in the western part of the county, are becoming harder and harder to come by. And while it may not be the best site for a school this year or next year, 15 years from now, it may be the perfect site for a school centrally located in that area. And 15 years from now, it may cost us 2 or 3 times as much to try to acquire it if it's still available at that time. And I hope that this will be put to some public use and not just a mess of more houses out there. So I'm going to vote no and express my regret on this and express my thanks to the Grubb family for their cooperation at a time when a lot of folks don't find this to be a very cooperative issue.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Oneiser.
Mr. Chairman, I think both Mr. Stevens and Mr. Nizako are headed in their comments towards something that I'm hoping that the next time we meet with the supervisors, we can work together on building a long-term plan, because just like Mr. Stevens said, everything we've heard about this property, other than the fact that VDOT doesn't cooperate, there's no transportation today, it's 14, 15, 18 years from now, it may have been the perfect site. And to what extent should we be buying land or positioning land for future generations? Doing a 5 to 6 year CIP seems to be fruitless when it comes to long-term planning. So I'm hesitant to go against it because we specified what this property was for, and that purpose has been frustrated. I don't feel comfortable voting against terminating it. Had we just bought the land for future use, I would certainly be voting with Mr. Stevens to send the message that we should be buying land to position the school system into the future where we need it. So my hope is that at some point we stop doing 5 to 6 year plans and do 15 to 20 year plans and plan entire districts at the same time in clusters instead of individual schools. But this is an unfortunate result, but only because we restricted it to a particular use am I going to support it. Otherwise, I would have voted with Mr. Stevens for a very important message. I appreciate that he made that message.
Thank you, Mr. Oneiser. Other comments? Let me just very briefly thank the Grubbs, because they have, as been indicated, been resolute in working with us and trying to help us and help the children out there. And even when some people tried to say we ought to be building a high school on their site, that's not what they wanted. They wanted to work with us on a middle school and elementary school. They were very firm on that, and they were very gracious. A true gentleman, as Dr. Hattrick alluded to. And I share Mr. Stevens' frustration, and I've had a number of discussions with supervisors, including Chairman York, about how we need to have, and maybe when we have these monthly meetings that I think a number of them are talking about, we can impress upon them the fact that it's just too difficult for us to spend a year and a half or 2 years looking for sites with no degree of certainty at all that they will be acceptable through the county process. And 2 years ago, when I looked at the language in the comprehensive plan that says where possible, I thought that indicated flexibility. We're going to have flexibility in the future one way or the other, because we need too many schools and there's not nearly enough towns to accommodate all the schools that we're going to need in western Loudoun in the next 30 years. So be that as it may, that is a subject for continued discussion. I've had some preliminary talks, and I hope they will be fruitful talks early in the next term, because children of Loudoun and western Loudoun will need a better process to get land secured for their future schools. So, any other comments? Mrs. Godfrey, maker of the motion.
No, I think it's all been said. Let's move the question.
Okay, questions on the motion by Mrs. Godfrey, seconded by Mr. Nizako, to terminate the Grubb property contract of sale. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising their hands.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
That will carry 7-1-1, with Stevens voting no and Dupree abstaining out of disappointment more than anything. All right. Board members, we've made good